A city exists on the map. It has a name. That name tells you it was founded in a certain century by a certain people for a certain purpose. You accept it. Everyone accepts it. The name is on every official document, every textbook, every historical record. But then you look at the building still standing in that city, and the building does not match the century. It does not match the tools. It does not match the people the name points to. The name stayed. The contradiction stayed with it, quietly. This is not about one city. This is not about one building. This is about a pattern that appears across dozens of countries, hundreds of locations, and several centuries of official history. A pattern where the naming of places, structures, and civilizations consistently redirects attention away from a technical problem that the names themselves cannot solve. The question is not whether these structures exist. They do. The question is whether the names we gave them and the histories attached to those names were ever meant to explain them, or whether they were meant to replace an explanation that no longer fit. Something about that distinction does not add up. We are told that the great architectural achievements of the pre-modern world were accomplished by specific, nameable civilizations. The Romans built their aqueducts. The Egyptians raised their pyramids. The Incas carved Sacsayhuamán. The Cambodians constructed Angkor Wat. Each structure has a name, a date, a dynasty, a workforce estimate, and a method. The method is usually described in general terms: ramps, levers, ropes, manpower, and time. This explanation is consistent across institutions. It appears in university curricula, museum placards, government heritage sites, and approved documentaries. The naming system is complete. Every structure has an owner. Every owner has a period. Every period has a technology level. And that technology level, we are told, was sufficient. The problem is not with the names. The problem is with what the names are asked to explain. Take the stonework at Sacsayhuamán in Peru. The official account attributes the structure to the Inca civilization, constructed primarily in the 15th century. The stones used in its walls weigh, in documented cases, over 100 tons. Some estimates place individual blocks closer to 300 tons. These stones were transported from quarries located, in some cases, more than 30 kilometers away. The terrain between the quarry and the site includes steep gradients and no navigable waterway. The official explanation accounts for the transportation using wooden rollers, rope systems, and large organized labor forces. This explanation has been tested. Experimental archaeology teams have attempted to move replica stones using period-accurate methods. The results consistently demonstrate that moving stones of this scale across this terrain using only these tools presents engineering problems that the experiments have not fully resolved. The stones were moved. The method remains a subject of active academic debate, though that debate rarely surfaces in public-facing historical accounts. The name Inca covers the structure. The engineering problem sits underneath the name, largely unexamined. This pattern, a name assigned, a method assumed, a technical problem quietly set aside, does not belong to one region. It appears globally, and its consistency across unconnected cultures is one of the more difficult features of the official record to explain. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza is attributed to the 4th dynasty pharaoh Khufu, constructed approximately 2560 BCE. The pyramid contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks. The average weight of those blocks is approximately 2.5 to 15 tons, with certain granite blocks in the inner chambers weighing up to 80 tons. The granite used in the king's chamber was quarried at Aswan, roughly 800 kilometers to the south. The official explanation for construction involves copper tools, wooden sledges, water-lubricated ramps, and a workforce of tens of thousands operating over approximately 20 years. Researchers have calculated that this timeline requires the placement of one block every 2 to 3 minutes, continuously, for the entire construction period, including night hours. This is not an impossible figure, but it is a figure that has never been replicated under controlled conditions. No modern construction project has attempted to build a structure of equivalent precision, using only the tools the official account permits. The precision itself is a separate issue. The base of the pyramid deviates from a perfect square by less than 5 centimeters across its entire 230-meter length. That level of accuracy, achieved with measuring ropes and wooden sighting tools, remains technically unexplained in any reconstruction attempt. The name Khufu's pyramid answers the question of ownership. It does not answer the question of method. What makes this pattern analytically significant is not that individual cases are puzzling. Difficult engineering problems exist throughout history. What is significant is the global repetition of the same unexplained features across cultures that, according to the official chronology, had no contact with one another. The megalithic stonework at Pumapunku in Bolivia shares specific construction characteristics with stonework found at sites in Egypt, Lebanon, and Turkey. The H-blocks at Pumapunku are cut with interior angles and drill point precision that, when analyzed, suggest the use of either templates or machine-assisted cutting. The official attribution places Pumapunku within the Tiwanaku culture, approximately 500 to 900 CE. No written records from this culture survive. No tools consistent with the observed cuts have been recovered at the site. In Lebanon, at Baalbek, the Temple of Jupiter was constructed by the Romans, according to the official record, beginning in the 1st century BCE. The Roman construction is well documented and architecturally identifiable. Beneath it, however, is a platform of stone blocks whose origin and date remain officially unassigned. The largest of these stones, known as the trilithon, consists of 3 individual blocks, each weighing approximately 800 tons. A 4th block, still partially in its quarry nearby, weighs an estimated 1,650 tons. The Romans did not cut these blocks. The archaeological record is clear on this. The Romans built on top of a pre-existing platform of stones so large that no Roman engineering technique could have placed them. The official record identifies the Roman layer. It names the builders. It assigns the date. The pre-Roman layer beneath it has no name, no date, and no assigned builder. The stones exist. The explanation does not. The naming problem becomes more structurally interesting when examined through the lens of what names were applied and when. Beginning primarily in the 18th and 19th centuries, European archaeological and historical institutions undertook a systematic project of naming, dating, and categorizing the ancient world. This was not, on its surface, an unusual academic enterprise. The development of stratigraphy, dendrochronology, and eventually radiocarbon dating gave researchers tools to assign approximate dates to objects and layers. But the naming system that emerged from this period had a specific structure. It organized the ancient world into a linear progression. Primitive tools, then refined tools, then simple architecture, then complex architecture, then writing, then advanced civilization. This progression was applied universally, retroactively, to all cultures. Every civilization was placed somewhere on this line. The problem is that the physical evidence does not consistently support a linear progression. What the evidence shows, in multiple locations and multiple periods, is a different pattern. Sudden capability that appears without a preceding developmental phase, followed in many cases by a disappearance of that capability in subsequent centuries. This is not a fringe observation. It is noted, in careful language, and academic literature across multiple disciplines. Archaeologists describe it as fully formed appearance of techniques. Architectural historians note the absence of developmental stages at certain sites. Engineers studying ancient stonework refer to precision that exceeds what was strictly necessary for the stated purpose, suggesting either a different purpose or a different origin of the technique. The naming system does not accommodate this pattern. A name assigns an origin. A linear chronology assigns a development arc. When the evidence shows a capability appearing without development and disappearing without explanation, the naming system has no category for it. It either forces the evidence into the existing framework or, more commonly, notes it briefly and moves forward. There is a category of historical site that illustrates this particularly clearly. The sites that were discovered already abandoned. When Spanish conquistadors arrived at Tiwanaku in the 16th century, the city was already a ruin. The population had dispersed. The construction techniques used to build it were no longer practiced by any group in the region. The local populations interviewed by Spanish chroniclers did not claim to have built it. They described it as ancient, built by a people who came before them, using methods they did not possess. This is not an isolated account. At Pumapunku, the same dynamic: construction found, builders absent, knowledge unaccounted for. At the megalithic temples of Malta, dated to approximately 3600 BCE, and among the oldest freestanding structures on Earth, the culture that built them simply ends in the archaeological record. There is no transition to a successor culture. The building tradition stops. The population, according to current archaeological consensus, disappears. What replaced them and why the building knowledge was not transmitted remains without explanation. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the most structurally disorienting case, the site was deliberately buried. Approximately 10,000 BCE, someone filled this complex of large carved stone pillars with rubble and sealed it. The site lay undiscovered until 1994. The culture that built it is unidentified. No settlement debris, no residential evidence, no cultural layer has been found that matches the builders. The site appears in the record as a finished, functional complex, and then it is buried. And then there is silence. The official naming system applied pre-pottery Neolithic acculturate to its builders. This is a category name, not a civilization name. It describes a period defined largely by the absence of pottery. It does not describe who these people were, where they came from, how they organized themselves to carve and transport multi-ton T-shaped pillars, or why they chose to bury their own work. The name fills the blank in the record. The blank remains. The pattern of naming without explaining is most visible when you examine what the historical record is silent about. The Roman concrete used in structures like the Pantheon and various harbor installations has been studied extensively by modern materials scientists. Research published in peer-reviewed journals has confirmed that Roman marine concrete, made with a specific combination of volcanic ash, seawater, and lime, becomes stronger over time rather than weaker. The chemical process involved, a luminous tubermorite crystal growth within the concrete matrix, is not replicated by modern Portland cement. Modern concrete degrades. Roman concrete, in marine environments specifically, strengthens. The formula for this concrete was known to Roman engineers. It is partially described in the writings of Vitruvius. It was used successfully across the empire. And then, following the decline of Roman centralized infrastructure, it was not used. The formula was not passed to successor cultures in a functional form. Medieval builders did not use it. Renaissance builders did not use it. It was rediscovered, analytically, by modern researchers examining surviving Roman structures. A construction technology demonstrably superior to modern equivalents for specific applications was possessed, used at scale, and then lost. Not suppressed, not hidden, simply not transmitted. The infrastructure of knowledge transfer failed, and what was sophisticated became invisible. This raises a technical problem for the linear model of historical development. If knowledge accumulates progressively, sophisticated techniques should not disappear. They should be refined, transmitted, and improved. The Roman concrete case suggests a different dynamic, capability that is tied to a specific institutional structure. And when that structure fails, the capability fails with it. This is one case. It is documented, studied, and accepted by mainstream material science. The question it raises for the broader historical record is whether this dynamic, knowledge that exists, functions, and then vanishes, is more widespread than the official account suggests. The naming conventions applied to certain architectural styles in the 18th and 19th centuries introduce a different category of anomaly. Across the United States, Russia, Western Europe, and parts of South America, a large number of 19th century public buildings were constructed in what is officially categorized as neoclassical or Greco-Roman revival style. The official account describes this as a deliberate aesthetic choice. Educated architects, influenced by Enlightenment philosophy and admiration for classical antiquity, designed buildings that consciously reference Greek and Roman forms. This explanation accounts for the style. It does not fully account for the scale, the speed, or the material consistency of construction across geographically and politically disconnected regions in the same compressed period. City halls, universities, courthouses, train stations, and government buildings across dozens of countries, built between approximately 1750 and 1880, share not just aesthetic features but structural ones: ceiling heights, column proportions, interior acoustic properties, and in many cases, load-bearing systems that required engineering knowledge that was, according to official chronology, only partially developed at the time of construction. Some researchers working outside mainstream institutions have documented cases where the official construction date of a building does not align with the degradation patterns of its materials, the design language of its decorative elements, or the absence of construction records during a period when record-keeping was standard practice in the relevant jurisdictions. This is not a settled question. The counter-argument from mainstream historians is that record loss is common, that stylistic dating has wide margins, and that skilled craftsmen of the period were fully capable of the observed work. These are reasonable counter-arguments, What they do not fully address is why the capability visible in these structures diminishes noticeably in the latter half of the 19th century and into the 20th. If the knowledge was developed, taught in architectural schools, and applied by living practitioners, the subsequent decline in structural and decorative quality requires its own explanation. The named architects of the 20th century had access to better materials, better tools, and better engineering mathematics than their supposed predecessors. The results, in terms of precision and longevity, are in many documented cases inferior. The capability appears. It is named. It declines. The naming system does not register the decline as an anomaly requiring explanation. There is a specific sub-pattern within the global naming record that concerns what might be called placeholder histories. In multiple regions, official historical accounts describe a gap period, a span of decades or centuries, where a region's historical record is sparse, contradictory, or dependent on a small number of sources that cannot be independently verified. During these gap periods, major infrastructure, institutional frameworks, or urban developments appear in the record without clear antecedents. Russia's historical record in the 17th and 18th centuries contains documented irregularities that Russian academic historians have themselves noted. The founding dates of several major Russian cities, when cross-referenced with surviving building stock, produce inconsistencies. Some structures present in cities officially founded in the 18th century display construction techniques and stylistic elements whose developmental history, according to standard architectural chronology, should predate their official founding by a century or more. Similar patterns appear in the historical record of the Ottoman administrative regions, in the documented history of several South American urban centers, and in portions of Central Asian archaeological sites. In each case, the official history provides names, dates, and dynastic frameworks. In each case, the physical evidence produces at least some details that the official framework does not cleanly explain. None of these observations, taken individually, constitute proof of anything. The cumulative weight of them, however, raises a methodological question about the historical record itself. To what extent was the naming and dating system of the 18th and 19th centuries applied to organize existing evidence? And to what extent was it applied to replace evidence whose implications were inconvenient for the emerging historical consensus? This is not a question with a currently available answer. It is a question that the official record does not engage with directly. Modern institutions that preserve and display ancient objects occupy a specific position in this analysis. They are not, in the main, concealing information. The evidence suggests something more passive and more structurally significant. They describe what exists without being required to explain how it exists. A museum placard will identify an object, assign it to a culture, provide a date range, and describe its function. It will not, in most cases, describe the manufacturing process in technical detail, because in many cases the manufacturing process is not known with confidence. The placard fills the space where an explanation would go. It provides context without providing mechanism. This is academically defensible. Historians and archaeologists are trained to work with available evidence, and when evidence for method is absent, noting that absence is appropriate. The problem arises when the absence of explanation is not noted, when the placard implies, through completeness of tone, that the named attribution is a full explanation rather than a partial one. A visitor reading that a stone vessel was produced by craftsmen of the Old Kingdom using stone tools and abrasive sand receives the impression that the method is understood. If that visitor then researches the specific characteristics of the object, interior cuts that required a drilling apparatus, maintaining consistent pressure and rotation, surface finishes smoother than what abrasive sand on organic material produces, tolerances measurable only with modern instruments, the gap between the placard and the object becomes visible. The object is preserved. The method is not in the placard. The gap between them is not flagged as a gap. The global repetition of unexplained construction techniques, the sudden appearance and disappearance of advanced capabilities, the naming system that assigns ownership without explaining method, and the institutional habit of describing without accounting. None of these observations, in isolation, require a dramatic conclusion. Individually, each can be addressed with specific, reasonable counter-arguments. Taken as a pattern, however, they raise a question that the official historical account does not directly address. Whether the naming and chronological system applied to ancient history over the last 3 centuries accurately describes what happened, or whether it describes a simplified organizational framework that was imposed on a more complicated and possibly more discontinuous reality. Discontinuous history History in which capabilities appear, are used, and disappear without clean transmission does not fit the linear developmental model. The linear model, however, is not a physical law. It is an interpretive framework, and interpretive frameworks can be wrong, not through dishonesty, but through the natural tendency of any system to organize unfamiliar evidence within familiar categories. The stones at Baalbek still sit in their positions. The concrete in the Roman harbors still strengthens. The precision cuts at Pumapunku still do not match the tools recovered at the site. The builders of Göbekli Tepe are still unnamed. The construction records for dozens of 19th century buildings in multiple countries are still missing. These are not interpretations. They are documented, measurable, physical facts. They exist in the record. They are studied, published, and acknowledged by the institutions that hold them. What those institutions have not produced, in any case examined here, is a technically complete explanation of how the work was done. The names are there. The dates are there. The objects are there. The method, in case after case, across continent after continent, across century after century, is not there. And when a pattern that consistent appears in a record that is supposed to be complete, the most precise question is not what happened. The most precise question is what the record was designed to show instead. The structures remain. The knowledge that produced them does not appear in any document we currently hold. Whether that knowledge was lost, suppressed, or never attributed to the correct source is a question the naming system was perhaps never designed to answer. The object still exists, the method does not.